Hello and welcome to this edition of Tennessee Concrete Conversations, a podcast from the Tennessee Concrete Association. My name is Alan Sparkman, Director of the TCA, and my guest for today's session is Wes Blalock, who's with Blalock Ready Mix and Construction in East Tennessee, one of our longtime members. So we appreciate Wes being with us. And Wes, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do at Blalock.
Well, I am third generation in the family business here, and I am the general manager over Ready Mix and all of our building materials and logistics for the company. So involved in a little bit of everything that doesn't involve dirt here. So,
well, I can relate to the third generation piece of that, and I think that's in some ways, it's maybe a burden, but it's also an advantage.
Yes.
And I appreciate my history in the concrete industry. It's a big part of why I'm still here, I think. So we're going to try to cover probably three topics today, and we're going to start with what's probably the top topic for anybody in ready mix or construction, which is workforce.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about some of the challenges you're facing with workforce here in your operations.
Well, we certainly are facing, the challenges that everyone is in terms of being able to find drivers in our logistics side, qualified drivers that are ready and have experience on the vocational side of the business. A lot of what we're seeing is the drivers that are coming out are over-the-road drivers and don't have a lot of vocational experience, so it's while they are licensed, we're pretty much training from scratch on the type of driving environments that they'll be in, particularly on the ready mix side. You add in being on job sites and then add in managing the concrete and the quality aspects of that job. It can be quite a challenge. Here in our particular little piece of East Tennessee in the Sevier County area, we seem to have a little bit of a unique problem in that we have a county here that has roughly 100,000, maybe a little bit more than that, residents in it, yet we're getting 25 million plus visitors a year. And so we're building infrastructure and building facilities and everything for that many visitors with a relatively small population. So every piece of the labor puzzle is tight here, and you're competing with all the tourism industries and everything else, trying to get not only drivers but people who may be a driver but want to exit that profession and go do something else.
Well, they have lots of opportunities to do something else in this market.
They do.
I was attending a meeting here kind of on the tourism side earlier this week, and one of the statistics they threw out was that the tourism industry, and this was, I think, primarily Pigeon Forge and maybe Sevierville, so not Gatlinburg, employs about 45,000 people. Mm-hmm. And the population of Pigeon Forge, the permanent population, is 1,600.
Yeah.
So that doesn't count the county and the surrounding area, but it makes your problem particularly acute with you need local people. You have to have local people.
Exactly. We have to have local people, and we have housing challenges here as well. So it's hard to recruit people to move into this area to drive or be an operator, equipment operator, or mechanic, or whatever we're looking for, because we don't really have anywhere for them to go. So it can be quite a challenge. Most of our employees have learned to multitask and learned to cross-train. We do a lot of cross-training and just kind of figure out where everybody's needed that day and make sure drivers may be in dump trucks or vice versa. And I think that's just kind of what we have to do right now, is to figure out, what is most important with the amount of labor that you have.
Yeah. So you mentioned cross-training, which I personally think is a really important piece of the puzzle for our industry going forward. What's the response from your employees been? Do they like that, or do you get some resistance? It's probably a mixed bag.
It depends on the time of year. They're a lot less receptive to it in the summer. In the winter, when things kind of slow down, a lot of them are glad that they can go do something else.
Yeah.
It really just depends on what they're cross-training into and what they're coming from. And a lot of times, a dump truck driver or something, there's a reason he or she is not a ready mix driver. They don't want to be. It's a different type of driving,
Yeah.
and all these are a little unique. So there is quite a bit of pushback on that. But, you just got to find the people who are willing to do that cross-training and interested in it and, kind of take advantage of that and reward them accordingly.
And I think that's a key part of the equation is there has to be some type of tangible reward, especially today. And that's not unreasonable from the perspective of the employee. But I think if you can cross-train, you're creating a person who has a much better understanding of your overall business.
Right.
And for many people, not everybody, but for many people, they enjoy getting to do something new, something that's not the same.
Right.
So, though, potentially for the people you cross-train, the people that like that, I think that might be a future path for them to go, maybe up the management track or something. It could be a real benefit for them in their personal career.
I think so. I think, we've talked a lot about kind of the younger generation of employees in general and what motivates them. And, that keeps coming back is they want a clear career path. I think cross-training is one way of painting that you're not just stuck here. There are other avenues you can go to. And another, this is kind of where technology starts to come into the equation too, is that we have to rethink these roles and ways that we can make that cross-training and make these jobs, take some of these pinch points out of the positions with technology where we can. It's just like we use technology to become more efficient and, over the years with dispatching tools and GPS and things like that to speed that process up. Now we've got to extend that a little bit into where else we can use these things in our overall system to make us more efficient and really just to make the job easier and more attractive.
Well, that's a great segue into our next topic, which is technology and concrete and what challenges that might bring and then how we can use it to improve. And I think Blalock has been a leader in this whole area, particularly on the concrete side, in utilizing technology. And tell us a little bit about how technology is impacting you on the ready mix side in a positive way.
Well, I think, as I said, GPS technology and the dispatching technology are all of these things that and we've been tracking our entire fleet. We've been using GPS or some sort of tracking technology on our ready mix side for probably nearly 20 years now. We actually track our entire fleet now. We have all sorts of add-ons to that system, but you start to, it's not just about knowing where your trucks are or when. It's about getting the good data back on what customers are doing on their job site, which customers are taking more time. You start to really better understand your entire schedule and how you need to construct your schedule based on the telematics information that you're getting back from the mixers. And that's kind of that first piece of the puzzle I was talking about as far as the information you can get to make your operation run faster. Now we're kind of making the leap into the next generation of that as far as electronic ticketing, smart hatches on the trucks, drum probes, all these things to just make the job of being a ready mix truck operator an easier task, so that we can cross train and that they don't have to be experts on the concrete and everything. We can pull people from dump trucks or whatever and attract them over and also and appeal to the younger people who they want to be in a nice truck with electronics in it and the things. They understand how that makes their life easier. So We're investing heavily in it now. I benefit from the fact that we do have road construction and asphalt and other things that I can experiment across our entire fleet with. So we can try different brands and different technologies in different places and figure out which ones work the best and implement it across our fleet.
Yeah, and I think some of the technology, a lot of what you talked about has specific benefits for the ready-mix industry. So dispatch, telematics and truck tracking, really important to better manage your business, hopefully improve your schedule, save time, bring some cost savings. When you get into the fairly recent technology around smart drums and sensors inside the drum that tell you something about your product, in some ways now you're certainly making the driver's job easier, and you're taking risk out of rejected loads, which is really important. There's big cost implications for that. But you're also making the job easier in some ways for your customer, because in theory, if smart drums worked as they were perfectly, as you drew them up on paper, every load would get to the job exactly like the contractor wanted it, because you have the possibility of doing in-transit mix adjustments, which is actually really powerful. That's a big customer benefit. But then you also have the other side of that, which is the testing, the QC of that concrete.
Absolutely.
And it changes that game. And I don't think it's not a mature enough technology for us to figure it out how those changes may look 2 or 3 years down the road.
Right.
But
well, I think you bring up the QC aspect of it, and that's kind of that's one of the points with the smart drum technology and things like that. That's a good example of how using the technology is helping us with the labor aspect as well. Because if you take a smart drum and now you can check your air content. Now, whether or not you're 100% accurate or you're redesigning mix designs or whatever based on that, well, that may be down the road. But what you can get is a relatively good air check. Okay, so now if your entire fleet is doing that in the mornings, well, now you're eliminating some of that. You're eliminating the need to have those QC technicians. Maybe that eliminates one QC technician now that you don't need. And whereas, maybe 5-6 years ago, at least from our perspective, I know in our organization, we would have been having the conversation with, well, do we really want to eliminate that person, with technology? But that's not the conversation anymore. The conversation is now we can't find that person. We can't get them anyway.
Yeah.
This just eliminates the need for a position that we can't fill.
And it goes back to what you said earlier. There's not too many people who wake up in the morning and said, man, I want to run 47 air checks today.
Right.
It's an important thing. We need that information, but it's not the best job in the world. So, when you can start to make the job better, now that QC person actually gets to do more of what they probably really enjoy, which is, look at the data and know whether or not they need to make an adjustment to truly improve the quality of your concrete.
Right.
Without some of the drudge work. So
exactly.
I think that's a really
just
important.
Get those smart drums to make cylinders.
Yeah,
we can figure that part out. That would be.
Well, we could talk about sensor technology in the concrete, which is pretty cool. Maybe that's the topic for a future podcast. So one final thing I want to touch on with you, you're in somewhat of a unique position where you are, because you guys do probably a higher percentage of federal work than most of my members, because you've got proximity to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and it's just a kind of a geographical anomaly in some ways. So we're hearing a lot more emphasis on sustainability in construction, and recently passed legislation, the federal Buy Clean Act, that puts some hard limits on concrete mixes in terms of embodied carbon. So tell me a little bit about kind of what you guys are seeing with sustainability, embodied carbon, and how maybe it's impacting your operation.
Well, the Buy Clean Act will definitely impact us moving forward with our federal work. We will be, looking at ways to make those mixes for federal highway projects and anything really built in the national park, we're going to have to look at ways to, reduce our environmental impact on that. I think overall, in terms of, kind of the ways that we've maybe are used to looking at that in terms of, well, how going back to like the LEED system of, well, how far away are your sources and things like that. We are pretty blessed on that here, in that, relatively speaking, all of our materials are pretty close. But we will be looking at ways to reduce cement content in it, I'm sure. It's going to be an interesting thing with sustainability. We've seen this a lot with in the commercial side up here as well, as that sometimes projects will start off with a LEED goal or something like that, and then that kind of tapers off, particularly over the past few years as supply chains have become a nightmare for everybody.
Yeah.
But going back to the Buy Clean Act, I think it's going to be interesting to see how quickly specifications change to marry up to that, because you're certainly going to have to look at some of the different things in that they're requiring of the mix designs if we're going to start adjusting for other goals. It's not something you can just add on top.
Right. Well, I think for us in the concrete industry, we're pretty focused on what's happening on the ground today. So if you think about the average project, if there is such a thing, that project was designed 2, sometimes even 3 years ago when it went through a design process. It was bid out, 12 to 18 months ago. So some of these things like the Buy Clean Act and some of the other LEED projects, the current projects don't reflect where the future project's going to be.
Right.
And some of the changes that we need to make to meet owners and governmental agencies, designers, sustainability goals have to be done on the front end. And so I hear a lot of people saying, well, I've never been asked to submit an EPD, which I'm sure is true.
Mm-hmm.
But my message to the industry today is, well, you're probably going to be asked,
right?
Particularly in the next, let's say, 24 months. And there's some response time. You can't just turn around and type up an EPD. It doesn't work that way. So I think we're at an inflection point because of the Buy Clean Act and because a lot of the talk that we've heard is going to start showing up on projects that you're bidding and that you're going to be supplying in the next 12 months.
Yeah, and I think there will be a lot of scrambling on people's parts to kind of catch up to that. It's already, a lot of the federal work has very tight specifications on it anyway. So, this is something that you're going to have to consider as far as timeline. And not only that, but, when we start adjusting our product to meet these goals, like what does that do to our quality control? What does that do to what the driver has to do? What we have to train the drivers with, are the mixes going to react differently, or are slumps changing, or are air contents changing? Yeah. And I think that's something that's going to have to be worked through. There's a lot of things that may not be congruent right now. That at least in these early phases, there's going to be some growing pains to it, I believe. But ultimately, I think it's something that we all need to kind of embrace moving forward. I spoke with one contractor on a job recently. We were talking about this, and he says, well, it's kind of hypocritical for us to build in the national park and not consider this.
Yeah.
And I think that's a fair point. So, yeah.
Well, I agree. And I think there's an increasing demand, if you will, just from the general public, and not just for concrete, but for everything, to pay more attention to sustainability. So it may not be here right this minute, but it's going to be here really soon. And it does have, you pointed out it's not just the ability perhaps to issue an EPD, but it's all the other impacts that has. The changes you make to lower the embodied carbon in the mix have other changes all the way down the line. So to me, the message is you'd like to get ahead of that instead of be behind it. So, quick plug for TCA, we do have a program for our member companies that makes the path to issuing EPDs, I think, the shortest, least expensive path that's out there in the country. That's kind of a bold claim, but I'm excited about that, and I think the timing is right for that. So but there's still a lot of work for producers to do on the questions you've raised, and the only way to get the answers is to get started. Is kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah, and I think we're definitely going to get a crash course with it in working in the national park. We routinely haul concrete in an hour and a half to 2 hours to some of the remote places in the park. So we're going to very quickly find out what some of these changes do to the mixes.
Now, you guys have had the opportunity, like it or not, to be on the leading edge of some of those, pushing the technology of what we can do. We have answers, but you guys have some great stories that we've shared in the past that perhaps not by choice, but you've learned some stuff and come up with some solutions.
Well, we've paid for our learning.
Well, Wes, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Appreciate your insights, and stay tuned for the next edition of Tennessee Concrete Conversations.